Welcome back everyone. Let's just do a quick walkthrough in terms of how to open up our environment. Once you've started up the Anaconda Navigator, you will come to this landing page. The first thing to do is to change to the environment that you are using for your projects. Once that is up and running, I'm going to make use of Jupyter Lab instead of Notebook and fire that away and give it a few seconds to actually start up. The reason that I prefer to use Jupyter Lab instead of or ahead of Notebook is because of this additional features that allows me to view what file is the files that I have in the directory. That's the first thing, the directory structure, and as well as what Notebook is actually running. So right now I don't really need this Iris project. I'm going to close that off, but you can notice that it is still running with that green dot there. So I come to this second tab, which tells me that I still have one kernel sessions running. So I just click the shutdown to shut it down and come back here. And coming back to this directory, I can select Boston Housing. It doesn't show the full name because of the real estate issue. And then I can Control B to hide that portion. It will still show up here as an icon, but it won't get in the way of what I am doing. Okay, so in this example, we're going to look at regression. Specifically, we're going to look at Boston housing price prediction. In terms of the dataset, you can come by here in Google and type Boston housing dataset. It is a fairly well-known and common data set that is used for machine learning for instructional purpose. You can see here that you can read it in Medium, you can actually find it in Kaggle, and the list actually goes on a fair bit. It is also available as a data set in scikit-learn as well. I'm making use of the Boston housing data price. It's not complicated. It's very good for instructional purpose, but it's also complex enough to make it an interesting data set to make use of. It can be really simple, and it can be as complicated as you like it to be, or complex as you like it to be, because of the underlying data behavior of the data. It is not linear. Some of the columns or the features are fairly complex, and there's a lot of in there to like about this data set itself. So coming back to the actual dashboard or the Jupyter Notebook itself, what we need is NumPy, pandas, and we also need sklearn, also called scikit-learn. This is a library from Python or within Python itself. It's created by the community. I won't go into the history of it. You can actually read about scikit-learn in a little bit more details. It's created by Jack and a few other collaborators. It's a really easy to use API and fantastic for machine learning. This is actually part of it that makes part of the one of the reasons why Python became such a popular machine learning language, or used for machine learning, simply because of how the ease of use with scikit-learn. So let's just run this, and we should expect an error message, as you can see on screen. Reason being, we haven't installed this. You feel free to skip this portion of the error diagnosis. I want to leave this here to help those who struggle with this when this kind of problem pops up. But if you are familiar with Python, you're familiar with how to deal with error message, then feel free to skip this portion. And so here, what you can see here is it says no module name scikit-learn. Hopefully you remember what we talked about in our earlier section that talks about how to deal with error. You have to read the error message, and the arrow here basically tells you, okay, this is the line that's giving you the problem, and what was the error? No module name sklearn. So we come back to our Anaconda Navigator, and you should be able to see this basic screen here. We then go over to the environment, and within the same environment, make sure that you have the correct environment selected, and go to not install and look for sklearn. Okay, it might not be in this spelling or in this name, so you have to look out the exact name, which is let me just show you scikit. Okay, so here, scikit-learn. This is actually the exact and precise name of scikit-learn. sklearn is the library name, unfortunately, which makes it a little bit tricky when you do want to search for it, but nothing that Googling won't help you or won't solve it for you. So just apply by clicking the button here and let the installation run. It may take, again, a couple of minutes. I'm going to speed this portion of the video. Now that this complete the installation, we'll come back to our Jupyter notebook, our lab, and run this cell again. And this time around, the error message disappeared altogether, and the number count has gone up to 2. And let's run this, and you can see the actual version of the various type of library that I'm using, and scikit-learn is 0.221.3. Having gotten that portion out of the way, the next step then is to actually load the data. You can of course load this via the scikit-learn dataset, as the library has a documentation here. What I have done instead is actually store the data for you in the actual data subfolder. So if you look at the subfolder, I've already loaded the data here. I've got that from the UCI website, and just really to make your life a bit easier, and so that you can actually just refer to it right away. So since I've downloaded it as a CSV, so we're gonna just basically read it in using pandas as a CSV. And we can look at the first 5 rows of data. As you can see here, is that what we have is 14 columns of data, and that's basically in this kind of format. And I've added a code here to help you to understand what each column means. Now, although right now I've given you the description, there's no heading label or column label. I have added this row of codes here, or line of codes here, and with the name of crim zn following this order. And again, the documentation is from the UCI machine learning repository. And I just need to rename the columns, and that should actually allow us to have clean up prepared data for our exploratory data analysis. This is a fair bit of preparation work, but we'll need to do this so that we know the data that we are looking at or working with. Right now, what will be a good exercise for you to do is actually to read through each and every line or descriptors or description of the actual column label to help you to actually get a sense and a feel of what each column signify, or what kind of information is it supposed to provide. In machine learning, we call this feature. Feature really is a form of descriptors, or supposed to describe the actual data, underlying data itself. Some of it is useful, some of it is not. But here is all the data that we have for us to work with. And yeah, please do that before we go to the next lecture. Google around a little bit, either read it in Kaggle or some other blogs or mediums that people have actually written about it. Develop some intuitions before we move on to the next portion. I'll leave that with you as an exercise.